Hello, everybody. I'm super excited to be welcoming Torrey Peters onto ReadsByRoss today. I've been such a fan of you, Torrey, for a while now. When I read Detransition Baby, I adored it. I loved it. I thought it was so clever. I thought the characters were so brilliantly written. So I think naturally, by extension, I was like nervous when Stag Dance came into my hands. But I literally loved it even more. Like I just thought it was such a
Oh,
masterful, perfect, and also a really original book. So yeah, this is out this week with this gorgeous, gorgeous pink cover. I guess to start off, if you want to tell us about Stag Dance in your own words.
sure. It's a book of four, I like to call them novellas, and each is in a different genre. So, and takes on sort of like a different aspect of gender or trans experience, but not exactly trans experience, more just like the experience that we all have having a gender. So the first is like dystopian, post-apocalyptic. The second is teen romance that takes place at a boarding school. The third is like a tall tale, kind of Americana. If you don't know what that is, just picture lumberjacks doing weird things in the woods.
Yeah, I think that one was my
And then,
favorite.
oh, good, that makes me happy to hear,
Yeah.
actually. And then the fourth one is horror, and it takes place in Las Vegas. And that my hope is that like all four of them kind of come together to kind of make make people feel the experience, not like explain, oh, here's what gender is or something, but to basically be like, oh yeah, it feels weird, and these are stories that like you're in it and you kind of feel it from all these different angles and perspectives.
hmm Yeah, it's such a four kind of starkly different sort of genres as well to explore that.
Yeah,
And I think you go
yeah.
from such extremes, the way that you talked about your genres in it, there's such a different thing. Like, and I know that the themes are sort of similar, but like, was that intentional that you wanted to do four sort of genres that were so different from each other?
Yeah, I had originally envisioned it as five different genres, and actually, Detransition Baby was one of them, and it was supposed to be
Ah,
like soap
really?
opera. Yeah, it was
Okay,
gonna be like
wow.
soap opera melodrama.
Yeah,
Only,
yeah,
of course,
wow.
like soap opera is not novella length. Soap opera is like long
Yeah,
novel
there's
length.
twist,
So like,
then there's drama.
yeah. So like, and people are always like, "Oh, the plot of Detransition Baby is so melodramatic," and it's like, yeah, that's what I wanted, you
That
know.
was the aim, right?
Um, so that one just kind of went away, and so then I've been working on them. I mean, it's kind of been like a 10-year project. Um, so I had always envisioned them that way, and part of it was to basically be like, when I started, it was like 2016, and people were like, "Oh, like to capture the trans experience, you have to like create experimental things to like
Mm,
to have this far out experience captured in words." And I was kind of like, no, actually being trans is like not so alien at all. Like you can do it in any genre. It's
mhm,
not really. So it was like started out as this like kind of point I was making,
mhm.
and then it grew to be much larger than that point. Like I wasn't like, oh, I want to win that argument. I was like, no, I deeply care about these characters, these stories, and I just want to do with them like everything that any book does.
Yeah.
Um, and so then, finally, the reason I'm so happy to hear you like Stag Dance is it was the last one I wrote, even though it's not last in the book. And it's probably the weirdest. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really grateful that it landed for you.
No, I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. And I suppose with Detransition Baby, I feel like that was received with such like huge critical acclaim. How are you
Yeah.
feeling about Stag Dance being in the world now? Are you like nervous? You excited?
I'm nervous but excited. I mean, it is a different time.
Yeah.
Like when I published Detransition Baby, even though it was only 5 years ago, it was like there weren't that many trans writers publishing in on like mainstream presses doing kind of weird fiction.
hmm
Even though you could make an argument that Detransition Baby isn't that weird. It's kind of weird. It's got like it's got some like page 7 has like bug chasing. Like it's right out the gate to me. Um, so uh, and now there's just so many trans writers. Like um, I think in the UK version, Nicola Dinan blurbs the
Yes.
book, and there's like there this year I can think of like 12 or 15
Which
books
like
that are coming
5 years
out.
ago you could probably list
Yeah,
one, two, right?
Yeah, not in a year for sure. And so,
Yeah,
it's kind of nice because on one hand, I'm not really representing trans experience anymore. I'm just representing my own weird
yeah,
like ideas and the things that interest me and or obsess me, and that's pretty fun. Um, on the other hand, the political climate, like writ large, is much darker, and I think that there's a way in which there were conversations where in 2020 where I was like, look, this is just, this is a work of domestic fiction. I want to talk about that stuff. I don't really want to talk about oppression of
yeah,
trans people.
yeah,
And I think that that's like, even though the book is not directly about those things, I think this time there's like that if I'm given the chance to talk about it, I have to do it. And so steeling myself a little bit for that and knowing that that's kind of feels like the right approach in the
yeah,
moment.
yeah.
It's a little nerve wracking.
For sure, for sure. Especially like God, yeah, as you're saying, this climate, like it feels like you really have to put on your
Yeah.
suit of armor, right?
Yeah. And it's the book is not necessarily perfect for it, right? Like to basically most of the ways that I try to like make political points isn't to like directly make a political argument or a
Yeah,
polemic or something. It's to like make people feel a way, like, and oftentimes like sneak in from the side where you're like, oh, I've felt that way before and I'm not trans, but
yeah,
if I felt this way, I might have empathy, and that empathy might lead me to want to like learn or think differently. So it's like a strange thing to be like, I'm going to take a political stand about lumberjacks putting on a dance,
but that feels like such a clever way to do it. It feels like such a human way as well, and I
Yeah,
think w- the book does many things for me, but it does, as you said, build a lot of empathy and compassion with these characters, who people have nothing to do with their kind of stories, but still, I feel like that compassion is weaved so well through it.
yeah,
Um, and you said, I think it was in the acknowledgements that you were working on this for like over like 10 years, which is like such a
yeah,
long time. I guess one of my questions was, it was going to be, was there any stories that didn't make the cut? And obviously you mentioned how Detransition Baby was going to be one, but I guess like,
yeah.
were there any that like changed really drastically over that? Because it's such a long
I
amount of
mean,
time.
I'm more like a reviser than I am just like a new story writer. Like they each probably, like when I envisioned them, were totally different than what they ended up being.
Yeah.
I'm somebody who like writes a story and then changes the ending and then changes the beginning and then changes the characters. And so
Okay.
the different drafts that were in it, would probably be like they look like different stories. So there wasn't really anything that didn't make the cut, but there's certainly like whole sections and ideas and characters and plot lines
Yeah.
that didn't end up being included.
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, because I feel like writers, it's so nice to be able to talk to you guys about your crafts and your works, because
Yeah.
I feel like you all change so much in those kind of answers. So it's really nice to have like a really expansive kind of range of answers. Did you find what was like the hardest story in it to write? What one did you find most challenging?
I mean, Stag Dance took the longest. I mean, is the
It is,
longest
yeah,
for so that's one thing. But the other thing is, it's probably like the most different from anything I've ever done. For people who don't, haven't read it yet, it's which is I guess everybody. The it's written in a lumberjack voice, and in Detransition Baby or certain other books, you could say that, oh, those characters are a little bit like Torrey. I'm not Reese or anything, but like, oh, they're not that different than me. Like a lumberjack at the turn of the century living with a bunch of men in the woods for whole seasons while they cut trees is not my experience at
yeah.
all.
Wait,
And
really? That's not
so
what you do on the weekends?
I mean, I've been getting into it. I've been
I
getting
saw that
into it. Like
video. I saw that video.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, if you can go on my
Okay.
Instagram, you can see that I've gotten, I had to do my research. I had to get a chainsaw, I had to get some
It's method
axes,
acting, right?
get a little, method writing. I
Method
absolutely,
writing, yes.
I method wrote
Yes.
this. So,
We coined this
but
term.
sure, let's give ourselves credit for it. Um, yeah, so like, but like especially the voice, like I don't think this character is he doesn't talk like me. The cadence is like very strange, and also just like his way of thinking. Like it was, like for instance, he doesn't use any of the words that I like, modern words for gender or feelings or all this stuff. So figuring out like, how do I express feelings that I know I have in language that is totally alien to me, and that just took a while. Although because I did method write it, by the end, I could sort of talk in this guy's voice. I could talk in this weird lumberjack. Like I kind of drove people around me crazy because I would occasionally like slip into like lumberjack lingo to like,
Oh, wow.
and I can't do it anymore. It's been like a year since I finished, but yeah, that was probably annoying for people. But I had to get that deep into it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The way you talk about that does make it feel like it's quite a hard one to write, but also quite fun because you can play
Yeah.
around with it a little bit and you can have a bit of fun.
It it was a little perverse, like on
Yeah,
my part. Like it was a little bit like, oh, I wrote like a comedy of manners about like mothering and babies and life in the city, and I was kind of like, nobody wants a lumberjack follow up, and like the fact that like nobody was like waiting for a
yeah,
lumberjack follow up kind of gave me like a it made me feel just really free. Like I can just put anything in this because nobody has any expectations or even desires
yeah.
necessarily for this in the first place.
That's amazing. Yeah. Um, so this year I feel like it's such a stacked year for books. I feel like in Stag Dance,
Yeah.
it's coming out at a time with so many other great books. What ones are you sort of looking forward to particularly?
Well, I mean, I have a bunch of friends with books coming out. Heron Walker, Jamie Hood. My friend Jackie S's book is being re-released in the UK. I mean, those are just my friends.
Yeah, you
And
need to book a
then,
friend.
yeah, I have to. And also, they wrote good books. They
Yeah,
wrote
yeah.
really good books. Um, and then there's like kind of like stalwarts of like the literary world who like I remember reading Karen Russell's Swamplandia, I think in a bathtub in like 2009 or something like
Mhm.
that, and I've read a couple of her short stories since. But the book The Antidote is coming out, and I'm kind of like, oh, let's see what. And
Yeah.
it's like magical realism. I love magical realism.
Okay.
So, and that's
Is it
coming out the
called
same.
Swamplandia?
No, Swamplandia was the first
Oh,
one. The
yes.
one
The antidote is the.
in The Antidote is a new one, and
Ah,
I'm just like, I just, yeah, I'm really curious what this is going to be like.
yeah.
She's just really inventive. So that's one that, and also I'm like been thinking about it a lot because it comes out literally the same week as my book. So there's like it's like a secret competition, and also
Yeah.
it's like fun. She's like been nominated for like Pulitzer prizes and stuff like
Okay.
that. So it's also like a little bit of arrogance to me to be
Yeah.
like, I'm in competition with you, Pulitzer
Yeah.
Prize winner. you
Oh,
know?
nice. We love a little bit of healthy competition, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So I guess like, what does like an ideal writing day look like for you? Like, what's your kind of usual routine? Does it change much?
It changes. Like right now, I'm actually in Colombia. I'll just like turn on the camera. You can see
Oh, wow. I was
that's
wondering where that good
Colombia.
lighting was coming from. I was
Yeah,
like,
good lighting,
that's
right
definitely a
by
nice
the
window
window.
view.
Yeah, so I'm on the coast of Colombia right now, and I've been coming here for the last 4 winters to. I was trying to do screenplays. I was doing screenwriting for a while, which was a totally different process just because you're collaborating with people. But I've been coming here, and like my best writing days of the last 4 years have been here because it's so hot. It's
Yeah.
like right now I'm sweating. It's like probably in the 90s. And so I get up really early when it's actually cool, just for like, how other writers are like, oh, I get up so early to write and I get my
Yeah.
pages in or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
I do that. Well, I act like it's annoying. And then I'm like, and I do it too.
Yeah.
But
It's
like I
the only
have
time
to.
of the day when
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
the
so hot.
when it's not so hot. So I like go out, I go to the beach. I go like outside at like, I get up at like 5:35, and then I like go to the beach, go for a run, get some
Yeah.
orange juice, get some food, and kind of just like chill out until like usually like 10 a.m. And then it gets like crazy hot, and you get like sort of like siesta weather where like you're
Yeah.
just kind of like shell shocked from the heat, and there really isn't anything to do but write, which is nice.
It's
Like,
almost like you're
it's
tricking
like,
yourself into
yeah,
writing, right? A routine.
yeah, yeah. And it's, there's a real, like, I feel like in other cities where there's heating and air conditioning and all that kind of stuff, there's no imposed cycle on the day. The weather and nature doesn't impose a cycle on you. It's not like it's so uh, hot or cold at a certain point of day that you can't do anything. But like this whole city lives by that cycles. And so even if I don't have discipline, the city has like kind of a collective discipline that
Yeah.
makes me live in the cycles of the city.
Mm, nice.
Yeah.
Um, you kind of you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm really interested because one of my favorite things about the book, I think, was that your writing feels so vital and so evocative of trans life, both like
Yeah.
now and in the past, and kind of what it's looking like in the future. A kind of a little bit of a vague question, but like, is that like an
Yeah.
important thing for you to have in your writing? Is that something you kind of set out to kind of express?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been really interested in kind of trans experiences, because I am trans, that's the easiest reason why. But also in this book, one of the things I'm trying to do is actually get away from trans as an identity,
Hmm.
like as like a label that you put on yourself or that other people put on you. And if you've read it, but other people haven't. But if you sort of count them up, there's maybe like 5 or 6 characters who actually consider themselves trans in like sort of like the context where they are. And that's not only because like some of them are in the past, but also even now they don't necessarily identify that way. And like one of the things I have been really interested in general is not like so much what is the typical trans binary is like the binary between male and female, but really like breaking down a little bit the binary between cis and trans, in
Yeah.
that like these feelings about like what kind of body do I want? And I don't mean like do you change gender. I mean like, do you want to work out and get really strong and masked? Do you want to like be like hyper femme? Do you want to like how do you want to move through the world in your body? And like
Yeah.
you actually get to choose it. Like how do you want other people to see you? How do you want to like approach love and that kind of stuff? I think that like basically what trans people have developed is a lens and a language to talk about that, but it's not an experience that's like unique to trans people.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I was trying to do is like set up these trans experiences where where like a lot of the sort of like kind of like identity language that like makes hard borders between people get at least questioned or like messed with. Like in the first one, the post-apocalyptic story, the premise is that everybody everybody stops being able to produce hormones because of a pandemic that stops the ability to produce hormones. So everybody has to take
This into
hormones.
consideration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so basically then everybody has to choose their gender, and most people choose the gender that they always had. But just like what happens when
Yeah.
everybody has to choose,
Yeah.
has to confront that. And then the question is, if everybody's choosing their gender, maybe everybody's trans. Like maybe the most important thing about being trans isn't what gender you choose,
Yeah.
but just the fact that you had to choose it in the first
Yeah.
place. So, a lot of the stories to me are posing questions like that. The last one is kind of like about fetish, and it's sort of like, well, for years, transness has kind of like tried to sort of have a kind of respectability where it's like, oh, you always knew you were trans. It's not about your sexuality, but like oftentimes one's sexuality is kind of like a red light, or like a blinking red light, or like a canary in the coal mine,
Yeah.
like saying
Yeah.
like what you like is actually like a piece of who you are, or who you want to be, or what your desires are. And like oftentimes if you repress it, it comes out in all sorts of to me interesting ways, to other people like alarming ways. And that doesn't mean, if that's the way it manifests, that it's not trying to tell you something. It
Hmm.
may not be telling you transition and call yourself trans,
Yeah.
but it's certainly telling you something.
Yeah. And explore
And
that kind of idea.
yeah, and so for me, like these are things that really matter to me, and that like my particular life experiences I think have given me like a lens on that. And then it's like, how do I take that lens and not just make it for myself, but make it, you know, like put it in all sorts of different situations, including, you know, for people who you'd never guess would have that, like, you know, a 19th century lumberjack.
Yeah, yeah. That's such an exciting sort of space to explore. I do, when you speak about it, I feel like you do it so well in Stag Dance, and I really feel like when people read this book, it's going to inspire a lot of writers. It's going to be really influential. Um,
Oh,
so yeah,
that's
I'm
nice.
really excited for people to get their hands on it. I guess my last question is, now that Stag Dance is about to be unleashed onto the world, what are you working on now?
Well, it's really hard to write when you're about to like launch a book, because it's like it's just a different brain, I think, than the how to talk about something you've done is different than how to like make the thing that you've done.
Yeah,
And so I feel like almost like I can't make that switch in a day. I have to make that switch like over the course of a period of months and stuff like that. So I'm a little out of the creation stuff right now. But the whole one of the reasons that, you know, that my plan for being in Columbia this winter is to outline my next like novel, which I think is going to be like a very long novel. That I kind of want to write a novel of political economy, and by that I mean like I want to write something where like the like how people get money, how money moves, how money moves through politics, like something like Wolf Hall would I would
okay.
consider to be like a novel of political economy,
Yeah, yeah,
where, you know, people are rising and falling in power due
yeah.
to culture and economics. And they tend to be pretty big with lots of different characters. Game of Thrones, in some ways,
Yeah.
is like a novel of
So
political
I'm thinking
economy.
like cast of characters at the beginning kind of
Yeah,
vibe.
yeah, big and like big thing, kind of about how do people come to power? How do they fall from power? How is, you
Okay.
know, like gangster movies are oftentimes like, you know, the rise of a gangster is that kind of thing. So I have one about some trans girls in Vermont that start. It's like kind of a joke, but I really mean it. They start like a vending machine empire. So
Okay. Oh my God.
yeah,
Right.
another
I'm
left field idea from Torrey Peters.
right. It's like you do such different things, and I think that's what makes you
Yeah.
such an exciting writer, and why
Uh,
people are like always going to be interested. I
well,
know I will be.
I hope so. Oh,
So
thank
thank you
you.
so much for giving me your time, and yeah, talk to Stag Dance about me. It is out this week, guys, and I honestly cannot recommend it enough. Go out, get your copy, and just be blown away by the sheer magnitude of Torrey Peters. Thanks,
Thank you
Tori.
so much for having me, and thanks for being such a pleasure to talk to.
No problem. Okay.